And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Eric Neese. And Eric Neese writes, "Hey, John, I know you've already talked a lot about the Scarlett Johansson situation, but I was wondering if you saw the article in the Wall Street Journal that shows just how directly Bob Chapek screwed up the whole Johansson situation. Apparently, the head of her agency spoke face-to-face with Chapek and had an opportunity to put it all to bed, and he brushed him off instead. What are your thoughts?" All right, man. Thanks a lot for sending that in. And yeah, look, I thought we were past this. I didn't think we were going to have to talk about the Scarlett Johansson situation anymore until it eventually gets settled. But you're right. The Wall Street Journal put out an article that I think is very concerning. Rob, it's very, very concerning to me about what we saw. Basically, what this article describes is a situation where there was a very easy, on a silver platter opportunity for Bob Chapek to end the Scarlett Johansson thing before it ever started. And apparently there was a chance for him personally to settle it and get it fixed and get it done and move on. But instead, something else happened. Let's take a look. Let's look at this at length here a little bit, but this comes to us from the Wall Street Journal in their account. And that's this. This is what they say. CAA co-chairman. Now, creative artist agencies, they are one, if not the, Rob, the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood. They're the ones who own the Death Star out there by the AMC Century City. They are the main players. Anyway, CAA co-chairman, like the head of this agency that represents Scarlett Johansson, Brian Lord, had high hopes for the annual gathering of entertainment moguls hosted in July by Allen & Co. in Sun Valley, Idaho. Like many there, he was looking to strike a deal. In the lobby of the Sun Valley Lodge, he spotted Walt Disney Company Chief Executive Officer Bob Chapek, the man he hoped would make a deal happen. Mr. Lord had been negotiating with the Disney executives about a payout for his client Scarlett Johansson because they broke their agreement and put Black Widow on streaming instead of theaters exclusively. He was seeking tens of millions of dollars for the star of Black Widow in a contract dispute regarding the film's simultaneous release in movie theaters and on digital streaming. It goes on. Mr. Lord told Mr. Chapek in the relaxed mountain setting that after months of fruitless back and forth between the two sides, that they should come to an agreement, said people familiar with the conversation. Mr. Chapek responded with a classic Hollywood brush-off, saying in effect, "Have your people call my people." 3 weeks later, Miss Johansson dropped a breach of contract lawsuit on Disney. As Mr. Chapek had done throughout his career in entertainment, he left talent relations to underlings, rejecting a potential opportunity to forestall what has blown up into one of the most acrimonious star versus studio battles in decades. Miss Johansson had warning. Listen to this. This gets really interesting, Rob. Former Disney CEO Robert Iger said during a shareholder meeting in March of 2019 that Marvel releases would be available on Disney Plus immediately following theaters. That prompted Miss Johansson's team to ask Disney to guarantee that Black Widow would receive a traditional big screen release, her lawsuit said. Marvel's chief counsel, Dave Galluzzi, I should say, wrote in response that it is 100% our plan to do a typical wide release of Black Widow. Should that change, he wrote, we would need to discuss this with you and come to an understanding as the deal is based on a series of very large box office bonuses. So that comes to us. So rather, we learn a couple of things here. Number one, now what also goes on in the article, it describes that Scarlett Johansson's representation had tried repeatedly to reach out to Disney to make a deal, and they just ignored them. They wouldn't get back to them. They wouldn't counteroffer. They wouldn't enter negotiations, nothing. Then the head of CAA himself, like not even Johansson's personal agent, her agent's boss, gets together face to face with Bob Iger or with Bob Chapek and says, let's look, this might get ugly. So let's fix this right now. Here we are, you and me, you're the boss, I'm the boss. Let's settle this. Let's come to an agreement right here and now. Bob Chapek, I understand, Rob, that you want to delegate and you have people to do certain jobs. But when you run a team, at some point, you need to step up and take charge and fix a situation before it becomes unfixably broken. And Bob Chapek had that opportunity, and once again, Bob Chapek botched it. He botched it again. Instead of sacking up, putting on his big boy, I'm the CEO pants, and saying, yes, you and I are the big dogs here, to the head of CA. Let's come to an agreement here so we don't have any nastiness, so we don't have, Scarlett is one of our most prized members of the Marvel family. Let's fix this before it becomes a problem. No. What did he do? He dropped the ball. That's all this guy seemed to have done since he came over to Disney. And again, I want to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. I want to say, hey, he came into the CEO-ship under very, very difficult circumstances with parks closed and theaters closed and all that kind of stuff. Very difficult circumstances. It's still roughly in his first year-ish of doing the job. You got to give him some time to learn the ropes. But Rob, it just seems like a broken record player over and over and over again. This guy screws up everything. He screws up everything. And to find out that he actually had the head of CAA face to face with him saying, dude, let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. Let's come to a good in principle agreement. And then we'll give that agreement to our underlings and they can hammer out the details. But let's come to it. And what'd he do? No. I got people that handle that. Because I'm the CEO now. I don't get my hands dirty. Bob Iger never would have let that happen. Bob Iger would have said, hell yeah, let's head over to that bar right now. Let's sit down, grab a couple of drinks, and let's not get our asses off the seat until we have an agreement. That's what Bob Iger would have done, but that's not what Bob Chapek does. And because of that, the most embarrassing PR thing from a talent company relations that has maybe ever happened to Disney has exploded. And maybe because of that, the Russo brothers might not come back now, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Rob, the more that information that comes out about how badly Disney's CEO has completely fucked this up is unbelievable to me. And kudos to the Wall Street Journal for their report. Anyway, Rob, you had a chance to read this report and see the things in it. What stands out to you, and where do we go from here? What's going on now?
Well, I think the real problem here is that there was money involved, a lot of money. And I think that Bob Chapek was out of his depth. I think that he's like, we're now talking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars. And he was like, he's not a guy that's used to in his past. He couldn't make some unilateral decision to spend that kind of money. If the shareholders came down on him or if anyone else at Disney said, what? You did what? You made a deal to do what? You need a sack, man. You need some big cojones to make a deal like that. And Bob Chapek is a corporate man through and through. He would never unilaterally make some kind of a decision that involved that kind of money. He doesn't have the balls. And I mean, this could have been a defining moment where he stepped out and said, you know what, this company's mine now. I've made a decision. I stand by it. So will Disney. And we're going to repair our relationship with Black Widow, one of our Avengers, our core team, because she deserves it. You should have just come out and said that shit. Stand up. Be a leader. But no, I'm sure faced with the daunting task of having to spend some actual money without making consultations with whomever he figured he had to make consultations with, he wouldn't do it. I think that this moment could have been a defining moment where he came out from under the shadow of Bob Iger and planted his own flag, the Chapek flag on Planet Chapek. But he didn't do it. He didn't do it. And he's a sniveling leader until he does something big and bold. That's how you make a company your own. You don't apologize. You don't look back. And was it risky? Sure. Could it have ended his career if he made the wrong choice? Maybe. But on the other hand, he could have come out with the picture of him and Scarlett Johansson shaking hands and saying, we put it behind us. We're moving forward.
Yeah. Now, look, according to CAA as well, they came out of the gate with a very unreasonable starting point. Like, according to the report in Wall Street Journal, her side came out asking Disney for $100 million. But go ahead.
But you do that knowing you're going to negotiate down.
Exactly. And that's what they said. They said, we thought that was a starting point and that, we would send the offer. We would say, look, we want $100 million for this. And then what happens is Disney looks and says, that's interesting, but it ain't going to happen. How about $20 million? Then
right.
CEA would say, it's fucking like Pawn Stars. It's Pawn Stars. Yeah. I can't give you 500 for that book. Best I can do is 200. And you go back and forth, but they wouldn't even respond. That's the thing in the Wall Street Journal says, like, after they sent out the initial offer, they expected a counter offer. Never came. They reached out again. No response. Reached out again. No response. And you're right, Rob, you put it perfectly. Bob Chapek doesn't have the balls to do this job. At least not yet. I still want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can learn that he needs to do this stuff, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I would say that the problem is he's never been afforded a position where he could do that kind of thing. Like, to be fair, dude, you have to know that you can make these kinds of moves. And he's probably never been in a position where, he's had to listen to people. He goes into meetings. He listens to reports. He's given cost benefit analyses. He's got that's been his career. So it's an alien notion to him that he could come out and make this kind of deal. And the thing is, that's what CEOs sometimes are called upon to do. You sack up and you go in there and you make that tough deal. After all, you know what I always say, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And he could have come out again. I think there's, like so often in American corporate culture, there's a lot of fear. You make one wrong decision, it can end your career. But the flip side of that is you make a bold decision, it cements your place in history, and you move forward and people don't doubt you anymore.
But what was the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario for Bob Chapek was we give her $50 million and some of my subordinates maybe feel we gave her a little too much. By brushing it off and shirking his responsibility as the top dog, now what he's got is a PR nightmare. The company has been embarrassed publicly. And this is far worse of a situation than it would have been if they paid her. I don't know. Let's say Bob Chapek was kind of flexible and he gave her like $10 million, $15 million more than maybe they should have gave her. Okay, well, that's $10 to $15 million. The public embarrassment that they now have, I propose is worse than that. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway, guys, question is for you. This is the drama that just seems to keep on giving. Anyway, look, I still have hope and belief that this guy, Bob Chapek, can come into his own. He's got one of the most difficult jobs in the world. I don't want to underplay that. And I also don't want to underplay that he came into the job under very, very, very difficult circumstances. And I don't want to downplay any of that. And there's a learning curve to it. We can all keep our fingers crossed and hope that he gets better and he's going to take these failures and learn from them and become a CEO worthy of being the successor to Big Papa Iger. I don't see it yet, but here's hoping that he can. Question is for you guys. What do you think about this situation? Jump on down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.